What was the please stop school presentation that you witnessed? Part 2. My junior year in French class. This one girl did not know French at all, despite taking the class for 4 years. She was pretty open about it too, laughing and saying how she didn't need this class in the middle of the presentation. The teacher asked her to sit. I had issues presenting in French all the time, even though I absolutely love it in English. I think people, including myself, get too in their heads about getting everything perfect when, in reality, most people probably aren't even listening, and a lot of the time, we don't speak our first language properly. It always felt kinda bad because I knew how to write and understand French perfectly, but looked like an idiot whenever I actually had to speak it. It's me. I did this. I cringe about it to this day, nearly 20 years later. I was 16 and in high school. My high school was going to do a spring talent show. I wanted to be in the talent show and show off my talents. The problem was, my actual talents are not ones that I could show off at a talent show, so I decided to try singing. I have never sung in my life. I have never had voice lessons. I was in my prime weeb stage and chose an anime song to sing. I didn't know any actual Japanese. I had just memorized the lyrics from hearing the song so many times. Luckily, I didn't make it past auditions, but several people saw an overweight girl in a Sailor Moon shirt try to sing Butterfly, despite having never done any singing or voice training ever in her life. Nearly 20 years later, and remembering it keeps me awake at night. A girl in my school danced to Hatsune Miku for a presentation. I cringed, but I admired her guts to do something like that. I never did this, but my dream was to include a slide of a bear running toward us, and then me yelling, "Oh no, a bear!" and then quickly going to the next slide, saying, "Whoa, that was close," and then going on like nothing happened. I have a feeling I would have ended up in this thread. As long as it's a GIF. Even better, have it start as a full screen GIF of a forest and start giving a long explanation on something before it comes. Yeah, it prob would have ended up here. I was a teacher's aide at my son's school, and I sat in on his class one day as a first grader did show and tell. She held up a book and said, "This is my diarrhea." Half the class looked confused, the rest looked intrigued. She continued to mix up diary with diarrhea for several more sentences, as the teacher and I were silently crying with hysteria. If just one kid had laughed, we would have jumped in, but everyone listened with respect and applauded at the end, so we moved on. Lois: "Chris, have you done your science homework?" Chris: "All done. We had to make a shoebox diarrhea on the evolution of man." Lois: "You mean diorama." Chris: "Uh-oh." I was doing work experience with a bunch of special needs kids at a school. We were watching a play that I don't remember the name of, which was about someone who was in a gang or something and got HIV. Instead of having any action or dialogue, the story was told through characters standing out the front and telling the story to the audience. It was dull as hell. The special needs kids were getting so restless, and I couldn't blame them because it was terrible. Straight out of Compton. Not exactly something I'd show to special needs kids or any kid for that matter. Us. We were to make a film retelling the story of Hamlet. It was supposed to be 5 minutes. Being the creative nutcases we were, we made a 22-minute film, complete with a commercial break, which made fun of prior books we had to read. Ophelia was a Jersey Shore whore who refused to take her Prozac, Polonius was a perverted Greek philosopher, and Hamlet was a depressed emo. Sword fights were video game-based, with Mortal Kombat themes. We presented it to the class and were cut off after 5 minutes. We received an A-. This sounds like my group. We had to do a project on Romeo and Juliet, so we submitted a half-hour film that we created. It was titled CSI Verona, so you can probably imagine what occurred. Someone gave a speech about durian in a class once. She brought a small, frozen sample that thawed as the class went on. The professor let students step out the room. Coincidentally, one of the culinary classes reported a gas leak and pulled a fire alarm. I didn't think durians gave off that particular mercaptan. That being said, warm durian does smell pretty wretched, and if you haven't smelled natural gas and a durian, I could see how they could be swapped. Natural gas, well, the mercaptan added to it, has a more acrid smell than durians. In my world cultures class in middle school, we had to take a different country and compare it to America. A kid proceeded to pick the United States and even converted the currency, and on his slides said, $1 equals $1. The teacher made him stop, but I kinda wish I saw the rest. It was a presentation that my art teacher made for the rules of the classroom, and it was full of Minion memes. One of my teachers did a presentation that also had Minion memes in it, and to make matters worse, all of the walls of her classroom are covered in Minion posters or Minion-related things. That room was by far the most uncomfortable classroom I have ever been in. When I was a 9th grade student, we had to present the poems we made in English class. Most people wrote about embracing their culture, loving their friends, etc. And then there was that one kid who recited a lifestyle poem, which compared fat people to beached whales and said that people who don't work out will die before they're 20. Reminds me of my idiot friend in middle school who gave a persuasive speech on why it's bad to be obese to an incredibly overweight teacher. We could pick literally any topic. One girl literally did hers on why saltwater taffy was the best candy. My friend got a D. High school junior English class. An easy 6 or 7 years ago, so details are fuzzy, but we had weeks to prepare a presentation alongside an informative essay that we wrote. Weeks of in-class time, like 3 to 4 weeks of full 5 days, 50-minute classes for this essay, presentation, and the actual presenting. This kid in the class decided to write about the problems of procrastination. For the essay, it was a few sentences, something like, I procrastinated and this was the result. Nothing done, etc. The presentation, a few slides, all white with the default texts and sizes, and it was something along the same lines of, I have nothing prepared because my topic is procrastination. The teacher was disturbingly unimpressed, and the kid threw such a fit about failing this major project. Seriously, it was a hefty portion of the class that he transferred out of the class. I've done projects like this before, hinging it all on some stupid joke theming the project on it and failing. Except I didn't care if I failed, or if people laughed. I just did what I had fun doing. You shouldn't do stuff like that if you genuinely want to achieve something because the chances of it working are 1 in a million. Student gave a presentation on the need to strap laser beams to deer heads that trigger sonic waves so that the deer are detracted from crossing highways. Context, I wasn't a grading teacher, but I was asked to supervise the teacher. Theme was supposed to be on how to solve a problem youth is facing. For example, how to be a solutionary. Student was in 10th grade. We had similar final presentation for my 12th grade English class, where the topic could be literally anything as long as it didn't violate school rules, because we were seniors and it didn't matter. I did a serious and satirical discussion on why we need to land on Mars. Some other were cool. One girl talked about her dog she'd had since she was little and got to bring in. Then there were 2 guys who went. One did a thorough explanation of why the Earth is flat, and the other was on why Trump should be president. Pretty liberal town and school, and consisted almost entirely of buttery males. I'll let you guess which one was satire. I've told this on Reddit a few times, but it's truly unforgettable. Smart kid in the class was giving a deeply sourced PowerPoint presentation on religion in Europe. He opens up his files, proceeds to click on his project named. He says, clearly I wasn't really paying any attention when I named my file. He gives the presentation. He stutters and sweats bullets while we watch in utter disbelief. The word is sitting there on the top of the file heading the whole time. This was during a study abroad semester while attending a cultural communication class. He had to rot in his own world after that. One time, my friend had to go to his Stuff I Don't Care About folder to open a project in front of the whole class and teacher. In sophomore year of high school, we had to do a presentation on a story or memory of ours and bring something in to show the class. A guy did it on his addiction to porn and played Christian rock for us. It was awkward. I was in a Japanese film class for a credit I needed, and the final project was some open-ended paper where you got to choose the topic, and our Japanese-born teacher told us some story about a creepy neckbeard who did this on Japanese porn and how no one should do anything like that. Anyways, on the day it was due, the creepiest neckbeard stereotype I've ever seen, who was in my class, presented his long, cringe presentation on Japanese porn in the class that no one wanted to hear, already knowing the teacher has seen us before and wasn't about it at all. If I were the teacher, I would have stopped him the moment he said Japanese porn and given him an F. Sophomore year of high school, we were tasked with bringing in an object from home and giving a presentation on how or why the object explains you as a person. Kid brought in a knife, not a big one, but a knife nonetheless. He actually gave a decent presentation, but ended getting expelled because of it later that day. Are you sure expelled and not suspended? Yeah, it's definitely a terrible idea to bring a knife into school, but is it worth potentially ruining some kid's life for bringing it in? During our practice rounds for senior presentations, a girl got up with her PowerPoint that had paragraphs of text on each slide, and then proceeded to read the paragraphs word for word from her note cards. The teacher stopped her and asked if this is how her whole presentation was, and when she responded yes, the teacher stopped her and asked her to change her presentation. She wasn't understanding what was wrong, so we kindly gave her some feedback. She redid the presentation a few days later, but the original was rough. Sounds like an awkward situation was turned into a teaching moment with a whole class involved, and it sounds like it was helpful rather than mean-spirited. And she learned from it. Good work all around. I've seen work groups of adults that couldn't do that.